welcome to Grit with Wisdom. This is the podcast that delves deep into the inner psyche of mountain bikers from all aspects of our sport in order to discover the tools and the tactics that can help us have more fun out on the trails more often. Our aim here is to help you understand what it takes to push our own personal boundaries in the sport we love from a mental and emotional perspective. Today on the podcast, I'm lucky enough to be sitting down here in Squamish with Ian Lowe. Ian is a passionate mountain biker and an all-round amazing community member. Many of you may recognize Ian as the Executive Director of the Squamish Off-Road Cycling Association, or SORCA, a role he has worked tirelessly since 2022. Coming from a diverse background in leadership and management roles, as well as a bunch of experience working with community organizations, non-profit boards, and the tourism sector, Ian really embodies the community spirit that SORCA represents. Known locally for his impressive race day costumes and his ability to make racing fun and inclusive, I'm excited to dig into the mindset behind all of this great work. Ian, welcome to the podcast.
Nice work. I didn't realize that you had done your research as well as you had.
Well, I hope I didn't miss anything. Is there anything you want to add?
No. Yeah, that was good. That was good.
Fantastic, man. Well, we just had a great lap out here in Squamish, checking out some of the new work on man boobs and LOA.
Yeah.
Excited to dive into some of the topics we're talking about there.
Sounds good.
Perhaps, for those that haven't met you out on the trails already, it'd be cool just to start with learning a little bit about where you grew up and when mountain bikes first came into your life.
So I grew up in Toronto. I'd never been or seen a mountain, but I always knew I wanted to live and be around mountains and the ocean. So I ended up coming to UBC. Went to school at UBC. Had done a little bit of mountain biking, just at what little there is around Toronto, Don Valley and stuff like that. But it was at my time at UBC where I really fell in love with mountain biking, if you can call it that, on the endowment lands. I didn't have access to a vehicle, so getting into the North Shore, going to Squamish was generally off limits. And then after graduating university, ended up coming to Whistler. And I guess that's where really the passion of mountain biking and the realization of what mountain biking was all about, that I really fell for the sport. And really for many years, I'd say it kind of defined my community. And I still fondly remember the first Looney race that I came down from Whistler, and it was on Tracks from Hell early in the season. And the reason that trail is called Tracks from Hell is it was a hike-a-bike, and you would literally have to jump from track to track through the trail. And if you ever missed a track, you were literally landing in 6 inches or more of mud. And this is just what you did in a Looney race. And it was very addicting. And so, I fell in love with it. Did my first testamental shortly thereafter. And that's when I saw the community stoke get behind the testamental. For those that haven't rode the testamental, like every neighbor came out on the lawn, and they had watering guns and they had sound systems. And you were riding through the community. It wasn't just riding the trails of Squamish, you were riding the community. And it was the coolest thing. And that came at the beginning of the race and it came at the end. And you couldn't ask for two better points for it. So it was a 1,000-person point-to-port race around Squamish, would sell out in about 3 minutes. And that's when I knew that Squamish was going to be home. And so flash forward to today, and my wife and I have raised our 2 daughters here, one that's in university, one that's in grade 8. And so both the mountain biking and kind of life were very much integrated. So I guess I'll keep going into how it got kind of led into SORCA world.
Yeah, sure.
So unfortunately I had some knee problems, ended up having to get a knee replacement, and was told that I couldn't really bike anymore. So kind of went through a bit of a challenge that a lot of cyclists go through, that when that sport is taken away from you, that is your identity. So I had a little bit of a challenge with that, then jumped back into kind of I realized that racing was not the only way to be involved in this sport. And I got onto the SORCA board of directors in 2005, I guess. And I was race director for 6 years. And that was super fun. I loved every bit of that. And we had a great team. It was all, this at that point, SORCA was very small. And yeah, it was definitely a highlight, and kind of seeing that organizational kind of side of SORCA was very enlightening for me. And yeah, so I did that until my second daughter was born, and then it was just too much to handle. And then took a little bit of a step away from SORCA until probably 2017, when my daughter was old enough to then want to race in the Syncos at the time. So started racing those Syncos, and that kind of got me back into the fray of SORCA. And then I'm probably telling you too much now. And then in 2021, the executive director position was posted, and I felt that it was a little bit of a position that I was qualified for, and that I was very interested in, and I had a lot of passion for. And I was lucky enough to get that position in 2022, January 2022.
Man, that's fantastic. Yeah, thank you. You just made my job very easy.
That's way too much information.
No, it's great to get that whole kind of zoomed out 40-foot perspective. Yeah. Awesome. So I'm curious, like right back at the start there, when you first moved out west, studying at UBC, you were studying human kinetics, sport leisure management, right? Your first mountain biking experiences out there, like what do you remember? What kind of a bike were you riding? What was the terrain like?
I think my first bike out there was a GT Karakoram. I think I upgraded to, I was with Rocky Mountain for a few years. I think I had the Element, the Altitude. Endowment Lands was very XC.
Yep.
And it was very, very wet. The nice thing was the worst of weather was when the least chance that you get caught on the hiking trails. So we used to just literally right outside of our house was the Endowment Lands. So we would be biking all the time. And my housemates and I loved the sport and loved just getting as muddy as can be. And it was pure pain and suffering, and that's what the sport's all about. So I did my first race that year in the Endowment Lands. That was a humbling experience, like anyone's first race, but you kind of start feeling the pain of cycle racing. So
yeah, totally. And feeling, like what was it that first really drew you into racing?
I think there's that quality. I forget what are those characters called in Star Wars that go zip through the trees?
Can't say I'm a big Star Wars.
Okay, whatever that vehicle is called in Star Wars, that's still the sensation I get today, that you are literally, like any sport, you're just harnessing nature. I do a lot of paddling and downwind races, and it's that same thing. You are just trying to harness nature, and it's pretty amazing that you can travel through the forest at the speeds we do on a mountain bike just by that one little sliver of dirt. And it's an amazing high, and we're in nature, and we're doing this in the kind of environment that we live in. And I've certainly got the mountain bike still. There's no choice about it. So
yeah, totally. Yeah, I love that explanation of it. Awesome. And I'm curious, you talk lots about really loving mountain bike culture, just as much as you love racing. Like, what is it that you love most about the culture here in Squamish?
Wow. I've been fortunate enough through kind of traveling around with my daughter's racing that I get to talk about Squamish and not only see it through our lens of living here. And I'll be in Quebec, or I'll be somewhere overseas, and people will ask me, they'll be like, well, why is mountain biking so big in this town? And I attribute it to a lot of little pieces that have all kind of pieced together, like Testamental, as much as you may not even know what that is, or a lot of the younger generation don't know what that is. Yeah. It created that culture, and culture is often how things are rooted. And things like the Testamental, things like the Pedal to the Metal, that's still going today. It's a grade 3 to grade 6, grade 7 race series. And I still not found another community in the world that offers bike racing at the grade 3 level. Like, it is crazy. And you look through who's raced in those Pedal to the Metals, and it's like Jackson Goldstone and Miranda, and like all these World Cup racers started in this tiny little level. So it's like, and I've other people have explained it to me that in certain communities, the cool kid plays hockey, or the cool kid plays baseball. Well, in this town, it's like a lot of kids want to go steer into the world of mountain biking. So I think that's the culture, and I think what's healthy in this community, that's not just about the racing, it's also about the community behind it. Whether you're a World Cup racer or you're just an avid weekender, it's a pretty healthy and friendly community. And I think a lot of that stems with the founders of SORCA and just the approach that they took on racing. It was never hyper competitive. It was just, hey, let's go out for a hard ride, and then let's come back and have beers and barbecue at someone's house. And
epic.
so, and that's kind of continued through today. Really, we just do that on a bigger scale with our Cinco rides and socials.
Every Wednesday.
That's right. So, yeah.
It's fantastic to see that hasn't been diluted or left behind as SORCA has grown.
Yeah, I mean, I do get some people say that it's not the same anymore now that you're not having it in a backyard, but there's not many backyards in our community that can accommodate 300 plus riders.
Totally.
So we have officially outgrown the backyard aspect of it, which is a shame. But then again, our hosts, our Cinco and social hosts, do a phenomenal job of still kind of creating that vibe, whether that's through music or DJs or competitions or the food that they offer, the beer that they offer. It's pretty phenomenal. So
totally. Yeah. I don't think I've been anywhere else in the world where you can go spend the evening racing, get a beer and a meal.
Let's get this straight. Okay, you're paying $5. Yeah, okay, true, that's $6.68 after the admin fee, but you're paying $6.68. You're getting a timed 3-stage enduro. Then you're getting beer, at least one, sometimes more beer, and then a meal out of it. Pretty darn good deal.
Totally.
So yes, they are fun events.
Yeah. So you've been a busy guy over the last couple of years. And just this year, we were chatting about it on our ride, we've seen SORCA kind of get to the end of a bunch of big projects that you've been working on behind the scenes for many, many years. I'm curious, what's one of the projects or the things that you and the team have accomplished this year that you're most proud of?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the two big projects that have recently come to some degree of end point is the Skills Park and the Pseudo Lot. Just to kind of go back a little bit before I talk about those particular projects. So both of those were started before my time. It was how the structure of SORCA work is important to explain at this point in time. So the 33,400-ish members elect a board of directors. So the board of directors' job is to decide the strategy of the organization. The strategy of the organization, so that's our board's role, is then implemented by a group of, there's 5 different committees that we have, and then staff, myself being one of them, are basically implement those strategies. So two of the strategic things that I walked into in 2022 were redeveloping the Skills Park that was originally built in 2014 on a shoestring budget, and it had deteriorated to the point that it was not being used very much and had a lot of opportunity. The other one was the problem with Garibaldi Park Road and people needing to park on the road, the danger of that road. That's actually a highway. It's governed by the Ministry of Highways. So to expand that parking lot. So some legwork had been done on various files. I think the parking lot one, like we talked about earlier, is an interesting one because literally the board of directors led by Jeff Norman kind of was working on that file since 2018 or 2019. It was 5 years in the making.
Wow.
And then once everything was kind of ready to go, it only took us 5 weeks to actually deliver that product. And the catalyst, because it did get sped up near the end, and the catalyst for that was that road is how the barrier construction vehicles are going to be getting in and out of the barrier construction over the next 4 years, as well as it was going to be the first community forest harvesting operation out in the Chekai Basin. So all of a sudden with all those, we were like, yeah, let's go, let's do this now. And yeah, I think we delivered a pretty cool product there. We've taken the parking capacity from 20 to 110. And I rode down the other day and the parking lot was at about 85% capacity and there was not a single car at that really dangerous corner. So I think that's, for now, it's addressed the capacity.
Yeah.
I think there'll be some challenges. And then going to the skills park, there was a lot of delays in that particular project. We didn't have the funding to make everything go quickly. We had to ask a lot of favors of the community. We had to get a lot of grants in order. Anyways, we were able to overcome most of those kind of financial challenges last year. And then we lost our window to pave the pump track in October of last year. Ended up having to wait until May of this year. But yeah, since it opened, was it May 30th? Yeah, it was May 30th. So our soft open is May 30th. And we are ecstatic on how the community is using that space. It's been so cool to see. We anticipated the average age to be about 11, 12, and I'll guess it's like under 9 is the average age in there. So many run bikers. Like that is going to just deliver this, or it's going to be this next wave of incredible riders being developed in our town because of the pump track and the jerk jumps and the little skill zone there. So
Totally. Yeah, it's kind of a path for progression before we're ready to get onto the trails.
yeah.
Or as adults when we need to spend a little bit more time perhaps off the trails working on some of those foundation skills.
I love to tell stories, but a quick story. We were in there the other day just doing some little bit of maintenance. And at the same time, out of both entrances, this kind of hipster dude on his cruiser bike came in there wearing like hipster clothing. And then this other guy came in on his like $15,000 dialed in enduro bike, and they jumped into the pump track at the same time. And it was just so cool to see. It doesn't matter if you're riding $100 Canadian Tire bike or if you've just got some pimping enduro bike, everyone has the same smiles coming out of that pump track. And it's, anyways.
I love that story.
Yeah, we're pretty stoked with that product. So
fantastic, man. Yeah, definitely recommend everyone in Squamish or anyone that's passing through goes down and checks out the new skills park there at Brennan Park. So yeah, lots of really positive things, and obviously there's all the trails that have been built, rebuilt, maintained at the same time as well. How many people are on the SORCA trail crew this season?
So this year, right now we have 6 plus our trail crew manager. They're not all full-time, but in our budget this year, we have just over 6,000 hours that's paid going into the trails,
fantastic.
which is really cool. A lot of that is, or a portion of that is funded through the District of Squamish. We have a 4-year grant agreement with them, and that really helps contribute towards that trail work, which we're very grateful of.
So the district is recognizing kind of the economic benefit mountain biking brings?
Yeah, absolutely. That was a 4-year agreement that started in 2019. So we're in our last year of that agreement this year. But yes, without that, we would not have as many paid staff as we have, which is great. And how that works, because that's, I think, a little bit of a veil of mystery for some people, is that, so again, board sets the strategy, committees support with kind of the actual working piece of it. So between AJ, our trail crew manager and lead builder, he, with some help from myself, we create an annual operating plan. And so people say, well, how on earth do you decide to do work on this trail versus this trail? Because there's so many trails out there. So AJ's created this hierarchy of needs when it comes to trails. And first of all, we have partnership agreements. We have like 11 different partnership agreements with private landowners, rec sites and trails, BC Parks, District Squamish. And a lot of those have requirements in them. Yeah. So that's a portion of the annual operating plan. Popularity of the trail is certainly a big piece of it. How easy it is to access is a big piece of it. So not only popularity by number, but popularity by ranking. We also work that into the matrix,
Right.
and that spits out then and then obviously the current condition. So we put all this into basically a spreadsheet, and that spits out the ones that we should be paying the most attention to, and then that creates our operating plan that then gets approved by the Trails Committee and the board of directors, and then that's ours to implement as far as the staff to implement that through the year.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's really cool. So,
No, and then I guess the other
yeah,
piece
it's a really
of that.
smart approach.
Well, that was the board's kind of strategic direction on trail maintenance, because it had to be done with some science. It couldn't just all be art.
I guess otherwise it can be clouded by judgment of like, hey, I really love pseudoscience.
That's right.
I'll spend 100 hours on that. Yeah.
Yeah. Or, I mean, we could probably interview all 3,400 members, and every one of them would have a different spot to work on in the trail network. And
Totally.
it would just be too hard to kind of just go after kind of work orders.
Yeah.
And then what we do also with the trail crew work is we supplement some of the actual projects with our dig days. So this year we have 14 dig days planned, 7 in the kind of spring chunk, and then 7 in the fall chunk. And we take most of the summer off because it's too dry to do a lot of trail crew dig day work. And then those actual digs work in conjunction with our annual operating plan. So they work on the trails that our crew is also working on. So the basically volunteers get to see what we're doing. They can contribute to that. It adds up to another 2,500 hours.
Wow.
Is what our dig days contribute to the trail network. So
Yeah. They're a fantastic way, to get involved. And I was amazed at how much I learned coming along. I thought I was just going to be tipping up rocks.
because you're at the Coho one, weren't you? Last year? Was that the one that
I don't think I've been to a Coho one. I've been to a couple of the other ones, one on Entrails, I remember. But
right.
AJ and the team do such a fantastic job at explaining like why we're doing what we're doing and like how a trail actually gets built. It's amazing, I guess, on both sides of the coin, how fast you can build a section of trail with 20 people, but also sometimes how long one section of trail.
Yeah.
You might be just fixing one corner in a whole day.
Yeah, and AJ certainly, I appreciate his philosophy that if we're going to go in, if our trail crew is going in and fixing a corner, it's going to be fixed. So that we don't have to go back in 5 years or even 10 years. Like some of the armoring work that we've done in Entrails and even Two Stroke and other, like we're moving rocks in there that are never going to move again. Like they're like 2,000 pound rocks to create a really durable structure that we won't have to touch again. So as much as they sometimes takes a lot of work for one little area, we also know that we're not going to have to go back to that little area for several years, which is pretty cool. And I guess one thing I do also want to give a shout out to is like the work that SORCA Trail Crew and even the dig days is still, like, let's just call it like an iceberg. That's the stuff that is above water, and all the things that are underneath are those volunteer builders that are out there. Like there is some incredible volunteer builders in this community. We just rode 2 trails today that were done by volunteer builders.
Yeah.
And
it's funny you were saying you get emails thanking you for sorting work. And
it's like, no, don't thank me, thank this guy. We're very blessed in this town to have the volunteer builders that we do, that especially the ones that are getting the correct permits. They're open dialogue with SORCA all the way along. They're following, they get some compensation from SORCA with our volunteer builder policy, so that pays for certain materials and costs that they have while they're doing their maintenance or their build. So it's a neat. I get calls from other communities. It's like, how do you get all these volunteers to get out there? And we've never needed to encourage volunteers.
Right.
It's like, that's just part of that culture that I speak about, and which is really neat to have in this community.
And I guess that culture grew from guys and girls getting out and building trails because they wanted to build trails.
Yeah.
Before SORCA existed.
Yeah. So Okay, so here I go again. So yeah, you think about SORCA, 32 years old, and there was not a paid employee until 2015, I think it was, that we had our first paid employee. So for the majority of SORCA's life, it was 100% volunteer.
Right.
And people say to me today, it's like, well, do you have a working board or do you have a governing board? And it's like, well, we have a governing board. However, we have a very much a working committee. So our board of directors are all involved in committees. They're all boots on the ground. They are doing work, and we would not be able to do what we are doing today without their input and without the community's input, because it's the volunteer, that kind of stuff happening below that tip of the iceberg is really what's driving this organization.
Yeah, that's a really cool way of envisioning the community. It's like, yeah, it is. And it's like you say with the projects, look, we see on Instagram, wow, we've got a new parking lot this year. That took 5 months to build, but below the ice is the 5 years of work you guys all did behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Getting that going. Hello everyone, and thanks for listening. If you're enjoying the podcast, don't forget to give it a like, give it a subscribe. And if you'd like to know more about my journey in mountain biking and my background as a mountain bike coach, check out episode number 29, where I dive a little bit deeper into that. Now let's get right back to the podcast. Yeah. What's been one of the biggest challenges you've faced so far since being the executive?
Yeah, I think, as I was saying on our ride, I think coming into the job, because I'd been involved with SORCA for 20 years and been a director for 6 years, flash forward to 2022, I thought when I was coming into the job that I knew about 75 to 80% of what SORCA was involved with. And after 6 months, I would probably say that was about 25%. And I think some of the really big files that we may not do a great job of communicating is the advocacy work that we do and how time consuming that advocacy work is. I mean, one little example, or one of the files, is the work that we've been doing with Matthews West and the Squamish Sea and Sky development, which is the proponents of the Checkeye lands, but also the debris barrier. So we know that implementation of that debris barrier is affecting a small area of our trail network. And so we've had an open dialogue with that developer, and they've been very receptive to a trail mitigation plan. So that was like 2 years, year and a half in development that they've now signed off on. And now that project is just about to kind of start, we now have some funding for the next few years to kind of build the trails in that area better than before that barrier went in. So, I mean, that's one file, and there's countless files that are like that are all happening behind the scene. And I think, going back to your question, one of the biggest challenges, I think that's part of the SORCA that not that many people know. And we started Local Dirt in 2021, and that's that kind of twice annual little publication of just kind of sharing everything that SORCA does. But admittingly, I would guess that 10% of our membership probably read that, because we have weekly newsletters, we have social media posts and stories every day. There's a lot coming out of SORCA, and everyone's bombarded by information. But we have tried to kind of create a platform to tell that story, because I think it's really important for members to know that this is where their dollars are going. Its majority is going into the trails and the trail network, but even the things I talk about in advocacy eventually get passed to the trails and benefiting the trails. So
totally,
yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, yeah. I can only imagine, like, obviously, having to deal with permits and stuff for the coaching I do. I can only imagine how many emails and how many phone calls and just how many different people you have to speak to in order to see good results in the 5 and 10 years time.
Yeah. Well, our town's changing. Like, that's the thing, right? It's interesting that I was involved with SORCA when we were a very grassroots organization, and it was super fun to be part of. Don't get me wrong. I was a volunteer. Cliff Miller was a great president, but I mean, it was pretty loose organization. I mean, the adage at that point in time was we were a drinking club with a riding problem, and there was a reason for that. Like, we had a lot of parties, but it was a great organization for a cultural piece, but it had to morph, and we still have a lot of fun, but we also need to be very professional. And when we're talking to ministers of kind of key files on a regular basis, like, there has to be, that's where I think paid staff do benefit this, because we can't be asking volunteers to be doing this only on their free time. Mm-hmm. We need to have some degree of staff investing into this. Kind of lost my train of thought there, but
yeah, no, that's some really cool insight. And yeah, I wanted to ask you, like, another organization that you're working with really closely is the Squamish Nation. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, what does that look like in terms of SORCA accessing and using all of these wonderful lands? And then I also wanted to ask, what can we all do as regular mountain bikers getting out here and recreating, on the unceded lands of the Squamish Nation?
Yeah, so I guess that would, if you were to ask me what are some of your biggest surprises with this role, I think to me, one of my biggest surprises, one of my biggest learnings is that learning journey that I've kind of gone down. Walking into this role, I knew very little about the Squamish Nation. I had been through the Squamish Lillooet Cultural Center in Whistler, and my days in Whistler had a little bit of a knowledge base, but coming into this role, knowing how closely that my predecessor and the boards before me had worked really closely with Squamish Nation, that agreement, the MOU with the Squamish Nation, just to be candid, was agreed upon prior to my coming on board, but it was kind of my then responsibility to educate myself on really bringing myself up to speed. And it's been it's almost like outside of work, but I have really enjoyed this challenge. And I by no means am I there at all yet. And I look forward to kind of that continued education. And this is now getting a little bit personal, but I'm almost mad at the school system that I was born with and went through regular school system, went through university, and the fact that I just knew very little about that. And here I am, I just turned 50 this year, and I'm like in my late 40s, I'm relearning what I wasn't taught by kind of a systemic problem that we had in Canada. It's kind of a weird position to be in.
I can relate there. I feel a similar way about everything I wasn't taught about the local Indigenous population where I'm from in Australia.
Right.
And it's shocking, isn't it, when we're learning this stuff for the first time as adults?
Yeah.
That really is like the foundation of the land that we live on and we play on.
And it's like, okay, I've got to get rid of all these memories and actually put this knowledge in that's actually like bona fide knowledge, not this kind of false information that I was given. So kind of now taking that into the context of Squamish. So yes, a few of the things that SORCA got involved with, again, prior to my time, that I've very much enjoyed kind of fostering its development. So the Squamish Nation Youth Mountain Bike Program, that's now a team. So Matthew Van Oostam leads that program. And that in itself has been really special to kind of be part of. Just because I now have kind of seen some of these kids grow up and seen their stoke on mountain biking, and get to see the videos that they're then putting out, and attending we recently just had a dig day and kind of meeting the parents, and it's I've called, there was one particular day that we were up in Darwin's Lot, we did a little welcoming circle, and it was it was one of those moments that I was like, this is just right. And it was one of those highlight moments for me that particular year. And it was really nice to be part of and kind of feeling part of that community. And then I recently had another special moment that I was invited to come to canoe practice with the Squamish Nation team. And being that I'm a paddler, getting into some of these cedar dugout racing canoes, it was so cool.
Especially.
Yeah. And like the little single one was like so tippy. They all expected that I was going to go in and be in the 6-person. Well, anyways, it's total sidebar stories, but
what a cool way though that mountain biking has helped connect two of your hobbies through the work with the Squamish Nation.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it's really interesting because a lot of these kids wouldn't be recreating on their own territorial lands if it wasn't for mountain biking. And that's what I just find so incredible is like, and this is just a small little subset of youth, but we're already seeing that some of the older kids are then now acting as mentors for this next wave. And this will just simply start to grow.
Fantastic,
and it's really, really cool. And like to think about all these special places that they used as hunting grounds, and like natural gardens out there. And now these youth are going through these zones that they wouldn't most likely be exposed to without mountain bikes. So yeah, it's been really cool. And I think that to your other question, okay, what can I do? I mean, the one very easy read that I read, I think last year or the year before, is the 21 Things About the Indian Act that you don't know, or I don't remember exactly what the title is, but it is fascinating to then, that's what we should have been learning in school.
Right.
And that puts the context of these conversations in a whole new light, and it starts to make sense. And it's like a 200-page read, really simple to understand, and it's like, wow, it totally opens up your mind. And I recommend anyone to read that. I would, on a very simple note, the other one that I like to ensure people know is like, Slathalum Synth is how you actually pronounce the climb trail.
Fantastic.
And how I remember how to pronounce that is like sloth, because you feel like a sloth when you're going up, but it's slath. And then alum, which is like Alan, but it's with an M at the end of it. And then sainth, with this like the word saint and eighth put together. So Slathalum Sainth. And if we could just be calling that parking lot by Slathalum Saint, or the climb trail Slathalum Saint, and not Legacy or the climb trail, that would be so respectful for the Squamish Nation and our relationship with that. It also happens to be, from all my references from the Squamish Nation, a very tough word to pronounce. So it's okay if we mess it up a little bit.
So we're rolling it together.
Yeah. So
that's fantastic. Thank you for mentioning that.
That's all. I'll test you right now.
Slathalum Synth.
No, Slath Alum Saint.
Slath Alum Saint.
Yes.
Awesome. Second time lucky.
Slath Alum Saint. Yes.
Yeah. No, that is a good one, and that is one I should know as well. So
yeah, and so I think that's the little thing. It's like if we can all remember just a few key phrases or key words, I think that shows so much respect to the Squamish Nation that we appreciate being able to recreate on their lands. I think it's also interesting to note on that context is that not only are there territorial lands within our riding area, but there is like the colonial version of freehold lands that they have large parcels within our network. And one of those large parcels is where Free the Speedos and Recycle go, that is a hotbed for non-permitted builds as of late. And I think we need to be very cognizant of that. I wish there was a better means of showing a map with all the different landowners in this town. But when we put rogue trails on private parcels of land, all that advocacy work that we often do behind the scenes gets and it gets shot down, or it makes those discussions so much harder. And most of the old landowners that we deal with are very receptive. So if we did it the right way, we would then have an established trail on their land. But when we do it the wrong way, it then takes back all those conversations that we've been trying to foster for years. So
yeah, it sounds like we're definitely better to ask for permission rather than go the other way about.
Yeah, or just even educate yourselves on the parcels of land.
Whose land are we building trails on?
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. We're going to change gears a little bit here and talk about mindset for riding.
Okay.
So I know you're known for doing some big missions out of the bike. Can you tell me about one of your most challenging yet most epic days on the bike?
Oh my God. Well, I mean, when I was doing a lot of cross-country riding, I still think to this day that the biggest climb that can be done anywhere in the sea to sky is starting in town and biking to the Shark's Fin on Brome. It's almost all rideable. There's a few pretty sketchy bits up there, but there's one particular one that got to the top and I forgot, like I lost track of time, and I think I had to get down in, I don't know what it was, probably like an hour or something like that. So ended up jumping out of at Cat Lake, and then I knew that you could do a river crossing through the Checkeye River to get then over to Dead End Loop, and then bushwhack to get to Dead End Loop, and then up Rock and Roll, and then down to where I lived on Perth, actually right here. Ended up doing that. Big river crossing, and it was a big day. But
this is just a solo adventure.
No, I think I had one other person with me. Okay. I had to ditch them at the top because they didn't want to do the river crossing. But yeah, it was a good one.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah,
and it's what I'd describe as type 2 fun. I don't know if you'd agree with that. Do you have any tough moments out there on the bike when you're really battling mentally on days like that?
I think probably my biggest mental battle, I did a race in Kamloops one year, and like 20 minutes into like a 3-hour race, I went down really hard, and I ended up having like one gear, slashed my entire leg, and I ended up finishing in like 4 hours, but it was a really, really big battle with myself and my bike, but I wanted Stave Lake. I'll never forget that freaking race. But yeah, that was a tough day for me. But
what were some of the things that were going through your mind? You were thinking about quitting it all?
But as you get further and further, that particular race is one giant loop. So basically the best place to quit would have been right at the beginning, because then I could get back. But so the further you get into it, the further away you are from the start. And then once you kind of get to that crux, well, you might as well keep going. So
it reminds me of that Buddhist saying, once begin, better finish.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Maybe not the best thing that I did for my body, but anyways.
Were you glad you finished?
I was very glad that I finished. Yeah. Yes, of course.
Fantastic. So I guess when you're in some of those moments, perhaps it doesn't have to be to that extreme, just out on a regular Sufferfest. Is there any tools that you've kind of picked up along the way or learned along the years that will help you with some of those challenging moments?
The power of distraction, for sure. I always find I did a little bit of road racing, or a little bit of road biking, I should say. And road biking, there's less ability for distraction, and I find that you feel more tired when you're road biking because of that. Whereas when I'm mountain biking, those little moments like that Star Wars character going through the trees, and you're getting your mind off of how fatigued you are, and just having that kind of youthful sensation of traveling through trees, and you forget about it. And so I think finding those little moments of distraction, and it's kind of a parenting style in mine too, the power of distraction. But I think those are really, really important for kind of getting through those hard moments.
That's awesome, man. And we are all just big kids, hey? Which I think
we are just big kids.
Yeah. Fantastic. I know, here at Squamish, we're chatting a little bit about the nature of our terrain often being quite difficult, quite challenging, steep and chunky. they can be kind of, well, I guess one side of the coin is progression is awesome, and we do have kind of endless progression here in our backyard. Do you ever get sucked into that idea of kind of one-upmanship or wanting to constantly up the bar or up your level of riding?
Right. Yeah, I don't really get that pressure, and I think it's because I grew up at a time in mountain biking where like jumping was not a critical skill set
Right.
in the sport, because it just didn't exist. It was tech trails. I'm very comfortable on tech trails. Take me to like a big jump trail and I feel like a fish out of water. And it's so I see good jumpers as an incredible, cool skill set that looks so easy, but I also know that it's not me. And I laugh at the irony of this because I just hurt myself on BVOD. That it has a little bit of that one-upmanship, that particular ride.
Right.
Shout out to Brian Reiser, who's raised $40,000 for search and rescue through that event through 25 years. So
happy for them, but really feeding into that community culture. Hey?
Yeah, and I mean, there's a little bit of that one-upmanship, and I didn't actually injure myself on a feature. It was just after a feature, but yeah, I don't really get a sense of that, and maybe it's just because I'm old now and more mature that I.
That's why I wonder, like when you started, you were obviously heavily involved in cross-country racing. Was it more so a speed thing or a competition thing rather than doing a new feature for Instagram like it might be now?
Totally. Yeah, good point. I mean, it was all about total speed, right? So at the end of the race, it didn't matter how fast you went off that one drop or that one whatever feature. It was your time at the end.
Right.
Generally, the people that were riding a lot in Squamish had pretty decent technical skills in XC races and still do today. Yeah, it was a fun little period of time for me, but yeah, I think it was never kind of that bravado. I never kind of got that with riding.
Yeah, well, that's awesome.
So
great. What's been one of your biggest challenges on the bike over the years? Jumping, okay. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess a big yeah, after I had my knee surgery, so I have an artificial right knee. I can't bike as much anymore. So it was again going back to the community. Like when I had my knee problems, both bike shops at the time, Tantalus and Corsa, they bent over backwards. Like they built me this custom crank on the right side. They built me this custom shoe that had the clip coming out of basically the center of my shoe. Like they did everything to get me back up and rolling, and it was so cool. And it's those little moments that you're very grateful of. I was training for several months just with my left leg, and I actually did a bike race with just my left leg.
Really?
And they both jobs supported me through kind of creating a straddle on my down tube for my right leg. And so it was a weird period of time, but again, it was like that love and that passion for keeping people on trails.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I know, yeah, often like coming back from an injury or a setback surgery like this can be incredibly tough mentally because we've lost that thing we love. But often we're also riding at a level that perhaps wasn't the level we're riding at beforehand. How did you navigate that?
I think I never got that because I've never owned a cross-country bike again.
Right.
So that was when it was like, oh, this is great. Cross-country is not the only form of this sport. You can just get an all-mountain bike and just have fun. And you can still go fast downhill and you can chill going uphill. So I think that's where I kind of turned into just kind of a typical rider. And
I love that.
Enjoying the descents.
It sounds like a really smart time to pivot, kind of like those outcomes or what you're actually riding for.
Yeah.
In line with your injury. Like, let's just have fun with what I can ride right now.
Yeah. But to your point, I have never skied again. And that's why I never skied again, because skiing was another passion. And in my mind, I would want to be doing the same things I was doing when I was 30 if I went and skied tomorrow. And I know that would be the dumbest thing ever. So I've chosen not to ever alpine ski. And yeah.
What would you tell yourself if you were forced to go out and do a day of skiing? Like, how would you keep yourself in one piece?
Well, this is okay. So I did lie because on my mom's 80th birthday, she wanted me to ski with her at
So
Whistler
rad.
Blackcomb. So I came out of retirement and with the two of us skied for a day. And it was actually, that's not true. Sorry, my 80th birthday for my mom. And then my daughter, when she was 16,
Okay.
I never taken her downhill skiing. She'd only cross-country skied her whole life.
Right.
And I thought it would be a fun science experiment to literally go to the top of Cyprus, never giving her a lesson, and saying go. So those 2 days that I've come out of retirement to ski for family members only, and both of those days I took it easy.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
And I had a blast both days.
Yeah. So kind of shifting the focus again to be like having fun with family.
Yes.
Rather than going as fast as you
Yeah.
can.
And just, good times.
Awesome. Yeah, shifting back to the racing, I'm curious, we just went for a fun ride there, done some stuff that we're both pretty comfortable on. How did your mindset shift when all of a sudden you were getting in between the tape, you were doing a race?
So long ago, it gets to I'm too old. It's so long ago. I can't even like.
You've done some local fun races in recent years, right?
I have, but yeah, I don't consider those to be. I mean, if you're not training, it's hard to call it racing.
Yeah.
So now it's just I'll just go in a race and.
Do you find some stuff shifts unconsciously? Like, I'm not a competitive racer. I don't think I ever will be.
Yeah.
Sometimes I still find myself getting caught up all of a sudden when I'm in that race environment.
Oh, fully.
And not ride it as well as I might if I'm just out for a fun lap.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Anytime a competitive person is against the clock, they're taking different risks.
Mm-hmm.
And I find even now, although I say that I don't race, I mean, of course, every ride I go on, I'm trying to get a PB on Strava. So I'm racing. Like, we're all the guilty of it. Like, it's kind of funny, right? Because I think there's a lot of kind of masters athletes that they're kind of obsessed with Strava, right? And it's not trying to get the KOM or anything. It's trying to get your PB. Mm-hmm. And I think it's kind of cool, but it's also not always healthy because you do take some undue risks, and often we're riding out there by ourselves. People don't realize in our zone, in our riding network, how many areas are out of cell reception. Even LOA that we did today is almost all out of cell reception. And so people need to kind of think about these things even when they're going after kind of Strava segments.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess to your point, although I'm not racing anymore, I'm still trying to race against my own self on certain situations.
Oh, I hope we didn't bring down your monthly average today.
No, that's right.
No, that's great. How do you keep that risk in check? I know I experience this kind of concept of risk creep, where over time I get so familiar with taking different risks,
right,
that I forget how dangerous, or how fast I'm going, how hard the trail is that I'm riding.
I think the odd fall or the odd almost fall, really kind of put it in check.
Yeah, sometimes life has a good way of reminding us to
and I
get
think,
back into the present. Yeah,
I think even again, being that I'm a little bit older now than the average rider in Squamish, I see peers that are getting injured. I've got injured, and I think you have to know your limits, play within it, and I think everyone has to keep reminding themselves of that, and I think it can be done as a safe sport. So
yeah, I agree with that. I often hear this idea of like, if you're mountain biking, you've got to learn how to crash. Do you just subscribe to that? I guess the other side of the coin is like learning how not to crash.
Right.
Which side of the coin do you find yourself?
I think it's learning to crash.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I whatever, like everyone else, we've all had some good stumbles in our life, and I think our bodies do learn how to crash.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I still crash. But I think there is definitely a skill set to know how to crash.
Yeah. How do you crash?
Some of that comes from experience.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, none of it's. I think it's now reflex.
Reflexive.
That does it, and not kind of consciously. I got to use this technique of roll.
Yeah, that's it. I still haven't figured out the technique. That's why I like to ask this question.
Yeah, I mean, I think as any kind of active person, we still trip and fall all the time. And I think that's important that we just kind of are staying active and take those, as my mom always said, if you don't learn, you don't crash. If you don't crash, you don't learn.
Yeah.
And
kind of like anything in life, hey, if we don't take those little failures along the way, those little risks, we're not going to learn anything. And I guess perhaps learning to be an active, dynamic mountain biker helps build that athlete within us, so that if we do take a fall we haven't seen coming, we perhaps can.
And I think other sports help kind of build the muscles that help support when you kind of go off script on mountain biking. Like a lot of athletes in Squamish, we do multiple sports, and I think those help with those times that it's like, bike's no longer under me. I've got to deploy a different strategy here. So
totally. Yeah, I like that analogy. Yeah. Awesome, man. And these days, if you do have a little crash or a little tumble, is there anything you'll tell yourself right away to kind of avoid it building up to be perhaps something bigger than it needs to be in your head?
Don't tell my wife.
Don't tell
No, I think like at 25, when you'd have a crash, it would take you a second or two to kind of shake it off. Whereas at 50, when you have a crash, it takes a day or two to shake it off. And so that's where I'm at right now.
Right. So trying to reflect on that. Hey, what happened?
Yeah.
How can we avoid more of these?
Totally.
Yeah. Awesome, man. That's some great lived wisdom there. I love it.
Oh, grit with wisdom. There you go.
Totally. Yeah, that's awesome. Got a question here from one of our followers on Instagram. Bit of a funny one. You can guess who it was. How did learning about the term smoko change your view on lunch breaks?
So yes, that's right. The last podcast that I did was with Simon.
There we go. I never realized that.
As he was dressed as Santa Claus, and yes, he introduced you to the word smoko, and it's now a joke amongst my family. So yes, I don't even know how to answer that question.
That's okay. We're gonna laugh. That's awesome. Speaking of costumes, something else I wanted to ask you before we wrap up here. You're known for some of your out there eye-catching race costumes. Can you describe one of your favorite costumes over the year?
Oh my God. Well, I think just because my memory is short now that I'm so old. Yes, 2 weekends ago, I was supporting some friends that were doing a silly event, and they had to ride their road bikes through the canyon, and I had a full onesie unitard on, yellow, that you could not see my face at all, and I could barely see out of this thing, and I stood at the side of the highway, and I then just decided that I was one of those like warning signs. And the honks and the laughs that I got were pretty darn funny. So that's the most recent one. And
fantastic.
Yeah, I loved when I was racing, just really enthusiastic cheering. It always drove me. I remember this one race that it was in the middle of nowhere, and this guy had a drum kit, and they're just pounding on their drum as we were racing, and it was the coolest thing ever. And anyways, so I've got myself in with a group of friends that just love to kind of go all out when it comes to cheering. So
yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah,
I used to play the drums, and I know how long it takes to cut one of those to set it off. That's amazing. Yeah, fantastic, man. Going to start wrapping things up here.
Okay.
Kind of last big question here is: who's someone that you look up to in the mountain biking world?
Yeah, I mean, prior to his passing, Dave was obviously someone that I respected a lot, and that was obviously tough when Dave passed. And I think why I respected that is that he had a career, a very successful career, had a passion for mountain biking. He also was always super enthusiastic about getting youth involved in the sport, and and was an exceptional trail builder. And then when prior to me joining, when he came under the SORCA fray, he had a great way of kind of balancing the conversations with kind of road builders, and then obviously within SORCA, everything is permitted building. So yeah, he is certainly someone that early on, he was, as much as he was a colleague, he was someone that I looked up to. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, what a fantastic community member. His legacy really lives on, doesn't it, in the
Yes,
heart and
it
soul
does.
of our
Yeah.
community and our trails out there as well. Awesome. We've talked about all kinds of different things over the last hour or so. What's the biggest thing or one takeaway you'd hope listeners remember from this conversation?
Yeah, I think so. If it was a different person that got the ED role and I was out there and I was contemplating if I was buying a membership or not, like seriously, it's the things that SORCA gets involved in, and whether that's staff or the committee members or the board of directors, or trying to corral the kind of massive pool of volunteers, like honestly, the $60 or the $120 for a family membership, it is incredible what horsepower is coming out of that. And I know that right now me saying that feels like it's a little bit of bias, but I'm also a community member, and I also know what is being offered by this incredible board of directors and the work that's being done. And I'm sure I would love that everybody that's riding the trails in Squamish should be a member.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. It's been really cool to get some more insight into like where those membership dollars go, and to learn, the incredible value that comes out of like
Right.
$60 each. I think you can't buy anything for your bike that's $60. So it's gonna be like
Yeah. And like,
most well spent money.
yeah. And there's, on top of the advocacy and the events and all the programming that we do, there's like even the discounts themselves. We actually have a member to this day who's not a mountain biker in town, but they buy enough Allison Brome that they buy a SORCA membership every year because it pays off the 10% off that you get at Allison Brome. Anyways,
There we go. Get
it's
your ice
like,
cream.
okay, whatever.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Whatever works for them. As we wrap things up here, is there any industry partners or community partners that you'd like to mention?
Yeah, so as much as we couldn't do what we do today without volunteers and our board of directors, we also could not ever do what we do without so our three big sources of funding are memberships, grants, which I've named the District of Squamish. We've also got a handful of annual grants that we apply for that enable us to do what we do, and then sponsorships and donors. So our sponsorships and donors basically comes in a few different forms. It's the après hosts that do all that amazing kind of après dinner and drinks. So those are almost exclusively local businesses. Then we have all of our tiered sponsors that you'll see them on our newsletter footer, and then they're all on our website. And these are businesses that just want to be involved with SORCA, and they respect that this community that SORCA has helped kind of foster. They want to make sure that this has longevity. I think just on the kind of overall kind of financial piece of SORCA, it is certainly this kind of long-term sustainable funding is something that we're working with various levels of government right now to figure out, because bike orgs in general are kind of very underfunded within the province, considering the kind of economic benefit that they deliver. And we've done our economic impact study that we did last year and proven how much benefit comes out of that. And other bike orgs are doing that across the province. And there does seem to be some interest at the kind of provincial level to kind of change this model a little bit. And I think if and when that does change, I think the capability of what SORCA can be involved in is going to be expanding, and we're really looking forward to that opportunity. So
yeah, fantastic. It's cool to get a window into that world as well. I'm curious, like obviously with that economic impact study, you've probably compared what mountain biking as a sport receives from the provincial government and what other sports, say like soccer and hockey and traditional field sports.
Yeah.
Is it incredibly skewed?
Yeah, it is, because the problem with mountain, not the problem, it's also the benefit with mountain biking is it's on public lands, it's free. So there's no user fees. But because of that, there's also no funding. So we don't get any funding from the provincial government unless we apply for one-off grants. And that's something that's being worked on right now. And yeah, even amongst kind of district funding, we are very grateful of the funding that we get from the district, but we don't have operating costs like the softball fields have, or the skating rink has, or the swimming pool has, that all have considerable operating costs. And really that amount of funds that they give to us help offset some of our operating costs for that trail network. And I think that's a narrative that we'd like to be able to educate a lot more people on, is that these trails, every trail that's built, the building part is only the little bit of it. It's the ongoing operating and maintenance that really has the dramatic impact, because we want trails to last 20, 30 years. And they take a lot of work to keep maintaining trails, depending on how they're built originally, but also the terrain that they're on and all the other variables. So we can't forget about that post-build kind of phase on how much that costs.
So I guess we give birth to a new trail for the community. That's an asset that brings people to the community and provides economic benefit. But it also is this liability, this thing that we've got to pay to maintain.
So the economic benefits that we established last year, $26 million is what the what visitors spend in Squamish on that 6-month riding cycle. So we don't know what the full year is, because we only had the funds to do the study for a 6-month period, so May to October, and $26 million. And that's just visitor spending. Wow. And we know that resident spending is generally 1.5 to 2 times whatever visitor spending is. So mountain biking contributes a lot of dollars into this economy, and I think we have to protect that, let alone just keeping that level where we are right now. Hey, we can enhance it if we have additional funds to make sure the trails are being maintained more. But yeah, I think it's such an untapped resource. Yeah. We could be really making this a big number in the future. So
for a bunch of dirtbags, we're spending an awful lot of money.
That's right. Yes.
That's a really cool insight, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
For everyone listening that would like to go and buy a SORCA membership or perhaps purchase a trail pass, where can they find SORCA online?
SORCA.ca. Fantastic. And if you're only visiting the town, like, I get it, you're riding here once, just go to SORCA.ca, donate now, whatever you're happy doing, $5, $25, $30. And yes, we respect that you don't need to buy a membership if you're just coming into town for a couple days, but a little donation goes a long way, because we leverage those funds. Generally, like, every dollar that's given to SORCA goes to about $4 into the trails through grants and all the other things that we can then magnify out of that money. So
fantastic, man.
Yeah,
we'll put some links in the show notes as well. Thanks so much for taking the time to come for a ride today.
Awesome.
What's up, guys? Just one more thing before you hit the trails. If you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to subscribe, and don't be a stranger. I'd love to hear from you about any topics or any particular episodes that you enjoyed, and even about any guests that you'd like to hear me have on the show in the future. You can find me on Instagram at _mind_mountain. This podcast, mountain biking, and mindset are all things that are very close to my heart, so I feel super grateful to be able to share these conversations with you. So much love to you all for taking the time to listen. I'll see you next time.